Well, it was really simple because my poor dad, I finally bugged him enough, I said, well, when am I going to learn about money? He said, why don't you ask your best friend's father, my classmate? And that was Mike in the book. I had to change his name because the family doesn't want to be known.
Of course.
And I said, why does Mike's father know about money? My poor dad said, because he's an entrepreneur. I went, what's that? And what are you? He says, I'm an employee. I'm only 9 years old. I'm learning two new words, employee and entrepreneur. I went, what? What's the difference, And then my poor dad says, well, an entrepreneur must know about money. An entrepreneur must speak the language of money. I went, what? And then my poor dad says, I said, what are you? He says, I'm a school teacher. I'm an employee. And what about you? Why don't you have to learn to speak about money? He says, because all I want is a paycheck and a pension, paychecks and pensions. So that's kind of I'm 9 years old. I am totally confused now. So I go across town. It's a little dinky little sugar plantation town. Like I said, my classmates owned the plantations, and the kids across the street at Union School, all union members, they worked for the plantations. And my other, so I'm going, I'm poor. So I sit down with my rich dad, who never went to school, ironically, and he wouldn't teach me about money either. And he kept rejecting me. I didn't realize it was part of the process. He wanted to find out how badly I wanted to learn. And he says, and as we all know as entrepreneurs, right, salesmanship begins when the customer says no. And so the more he said no, the more I got inside. I said, well, and so I kept, going back to talk to him and all. He says, get out of here, kid. So that was test number one from my rich dad. Test number two was as if I teach you, you have to work for me for free. And I said, why for free? He says, because if I pay you, you'll think like your dad, poor dad. The rich don't work for money. So if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is right there, the rich don't work for money. And then I'm now all confused as a 9-year-old kid. And so that's when the whole thing started about financial education. And I realized, my poor dad, he was going for his PhD, which stands for poor, helpless, and desperate. And in the academic world, the school teachers, most are, they don't know it. They're good people, but they don't know they're.
Yeah.
And my poor dad kept saying, well, if I get my PhD, then I'll be safe. Going, PhD, what's that? So he went to Stanford, University of Chicago, Northwestern. He still learned nothing about money. And so our kids, the young kids, about your generation today, they're they're indoctrinated, not educated. Black Lives Matter, critical race. I don't know what woke. I don't know what the heck's going on anymore. So our education system is more corrupt today than, let's say, 60 years ago when I was a kid.
The difference between employee and entrepreneur is fascinating. What it means to get a paycheck and how that changes your mentality. We're going to get into all of that and the whole woke culture. I'm surprised I turned out the way I did.